Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. There we go. Touchdown!
You are listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right of the week, and we've got a playoff team to break down as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 383. At the top of today's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with Greg Cosell from NFL Films so that he can break down the Eagles' win over the Washington football team, a win that helped propel this team into postseason play after a couple of other games swung in the Eagles' favor. But what stood out to us on the film from this win, and what can we expect from Saturday night's matchup against the Dallas Cowboys? Greg and I have got you covered right at the top of the show with Chalk Talk. But before we get there, a couple of things I want to make sure we hit on. Number one, make sure you head on over to our Apple Podcast page. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you've got a question, that's where you go and leave it. And I always appreciate everybody that leaves us your support over on that channel. It's the best way to help propel this show up the rankings, especially, look, this team is going into the playoffs, into the postseason. We'd love some of that playoff juice from everybody out there that listens to the show. Thanks so much to everyone that has left us your support over on our Apple Podcast page. Also, be sure to check out some more of our football analysis content that has gone up on PhiladelphiaEagles.com lately. You can go check out the All-22 review. That's where I do a video breakdown of all of these plays that Greg and I are getting ready to break down. And then also, make sure you go check out my post-snap read. That's an article that I do after each and every game where I break down one facet of this matchup. So make sure you go check both of those out over on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. Also, the Journey to the Draft podcast. I know we're getting closer and closer to the offseason, the regular season almost through. That means you got to start getting ready for the Senior Bowl and for the Combine, all those top prospects. Now's the time. Make sure you go listen to the Journey to the Draft podcast. Myself, Ben Fennell, Dane Brugler, breaking down the top names each and every week. Head on over to the Journey to the Draft podcast, wherever podcasts can be found. That said, let's get the show rolling. Excited to get another episode of the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast rolling with Greg Cosell in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Please be joined here by NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell for some more Chalk Talk. Greg, welcome back to the show. We've got Week 18 for the first time ever. You have to be excited to be on Week 18 Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast for the first time in history.
Well, I'm excited to be with you. I don't know how excited I am about the fact that there's 18 regular season games.
Right.
But, no, it's and of course, you and I both knew when the Eagles were 2-5 that they'd be in the playoffs. We knew that. So, this is
of course. Well, and that's why I wanted to ask you off the top before we got into the Week 17 game against Washington. Greg, obviously the team earning a playoff berth this week, obviously with their win, but a couple other games breaking their way as well, including the Sunday night win by the Green Bay Packers over the Minnesota Vikings. But just overall thoughts on this team, a complete turnaround. And we've talked about the philosophical changes on both sides of the football and how this team has evolved. But for a team that starts 2-5 to turn around and make it into the playoffs, I think it speaks to this team's heart and to their resiliency.
And I think it also speaks to the coaching staff. Look, they started out playing a certain way. And you and I can only speculate as to why they started out playing that way. They clearly started out, as we know, with Nick Sirianni and the offensive staff asking Jalen Hurts to throw the ball an awful lot. And obviously the results were not what they were hoping. I'm sure not what Jalen Hurts was hoping. And then they made an in-season adjustment. And as I said, we don't know why they started out the way they did. We can speculate, as I said, but the in-season adjustment allowed them offensively in particular to really play to the strengths of Jalen Hurts and to the strengths of the offense. And one could easily make the argument right now, and I'm certainly going to make it, that from a run blocking standpoint, even though they didn't have their best game of the year this past week, but overall from a run blocking standpoint, you could say this is the best offensive line in the NFL.
Well, and that's why I'm glad that you alluded to this Week 17 game because, look, they went up against a good front, and we talked about that last week, that when you look at Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, that defensive line can give opponents fits, and they did give the Eagles' offensive line issues in this game. Jonathan Allen was in the backfield a whole lot, and you look at Tim Settle and Ioannidis and Payne, all those guys, were able to make plays at the line of scrimmage. The Eagles offense, they could not get things going on the ground at the clip that we have expected over the last couple of months. But I think it's really important to notice that, hey, this is a team the last couple of weeks where they've had to kind of get away from that formula. They're not just rushing for 200 and saying, okay, we're just going to run all over you. We're going to mash you, and that's how we're going to play. They've had to find ways to claw and scratch and come away with a W. It hasn't always looked pretty, but I think that that's a mark of a team that is looking to try and make some noise in the playoffs. Is you have to find other ways to be able to win football games.
Well, I think what this offense has settled into is clearly there's an identity. As you said, look, this past week, and somewhat the week before, not as much. They certainly did not dominate in the run game the way they did for 7 or 8 straight weeks. I think it was 7 weeks, right? Where they rushed for 175 or more yards. But they're still obviously a running team. But the word I would use with their offense is efficiency. And I think that that's what they've been. They don't really, with few exceptions, they don't really turn the ball over. And I think that that's a really critical part, that they don't turn the ball over. They don't ask Jalen Hurts to drop back, 35, 40 times a game. Has he, and I'm sure there's been maybe one game in there, I just can't remember off the top of my head as we're just discussing it now. Has he had more than 30 or 35 pass attempts in any game going back 7, 8 games?
I'm pulling up his game log now. Bear with me, all of our listeners, as I'm doing this. Okay, so the most, in terms of just pure attempts, he had 31 attempts in that loss to the Giants when he got injured up at MetLife Stadium. And that was the highest since that loss against the Raiders back in.
So he's not had 30 or more attempts in any game other than that Giants game.
And that was the loss. Yep. Right.
So, their offense has been efficient. And look, you and I watch the tape. So all we do is we speak to the tape. And, I think that when you watch Jalen Hurts play, the fact that there are times you and I know that he doesn't see things exactly the way it should be seen. There are times he's a beat late with some throws here and there. But I think 2 elements of his game compensate for those 2 things. His second reaction ability, which is high level, and he does not turn the ball over. And that is such a critical thing because that allows the offense to be efficient. Because it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to punt the ball, okay? And we'll get into the defense as well. They played so much better in addition to the offense. But it's allowed the offense to be efficient because they do not turn the ball over. They do not give opposing offenses a short field. So while Hurts might miss one once in a while, and there are some quarterbacks in the league who are good players who always miss one once in a while. That's nature of the position. It's hard. He can always make plays with his legs, as we saw, for instance, on a 22-yard run this week on 3rd and 8. Other examples where he hit Ward, where he hit Goddard this week. But the examples are numerous. And so when you combine that with the fact that he doesn't turn it over, you have an offense that is essentially extremely efficient. Maybe they don't hit big chunk plays in the pass game on a regular basis, and every offense would like more of those, Fran. And I'm sure Nick Sirianni and staff would. But I'll tell you what, when you don't turn the ball over, that you really give yourself a good chance to win games.
Well, and that's the thing too, Greg, is that like when you see the way that they've been running the football over the last couple of months, we're kind of looking at this big picture, not just from week 17 against Washington, but when you look at the way that they're able to run the football, the reason why that can be so good for a quarterback like Jalen, outside of the impact he has in the run game, obviously, is you are essentially saying, okay, well, if you're going to drop back, we'll say the average has been 25 to 27 times or 24 to 26 times, whatever it is. You're going to drop back 24 to 26 times. We're going to factor in, okay, a couple scrambles. That knocks you down to 22, 24. And if you throw in a couple screens and some RPOs, all right, now you're getting down to into the teens, right, the high teens. And then you say, okay, well, how many of these plays do we need you to drop back and read it out and make a big time throw within the progression of an of the pass construct, right? And now you're saying, okay, if we're not going to ask you to do that all that often, we can put those plays in, and we'll ask you to make them at times, but we're not forcing you to do it time and time and time and time and time again, where you're going to get more failures than not because you're still a young, inexperienced quarterback. And now what we've seen over these last few weeks is those incremental improvements. You go back, obviously, the Denver game stands out. That was an outstanding performance on the road against the Broncos, right? But over the last few weeks, we've seen individual plays, individual throws. We're like, all right, like, yeah, that's what you want it to look like. This past week against Washington, a couple of throws that he made with defenders bearing down on him, staring down the gun barrel and pulling the trigger on a receiver on a crossing route or on a deeper intermediate route, right? You like to see those kinds of flashes of his ability to work through the pocket, but you're not asking him to say, okay, he needs to do it 22 times a game or else we're not going to win, right? And I feel like that's the beauty of the way that they're playing offense right now.
And you make a great point because you can control the situations in which you ask him to do that. And that's critical for a young quarterback.
Yep.
The term I always use is you can define the reads and the throws for him because the situation is such that maybe it's 1st and 10, maybe it's 2nd and 4. Look, in every game, are there 3rd and longs? Yes, of course there are. And that's where his legs come into play too. So, that's the other factor. So they're really able to kind of massage this. And the question everyone will ask, including you and I, we've discussed this, is when you get into the playoffs and there are those 3rd and longs and defenses are better and they're more aware of his running ability because they really worked that week to study, not that other teams don't, but it's the playoffs now. So the magnitude becomes greater. So that's what we're waiting to see. But for right now, this is an offense that's extremely efficient, playing to its strengths and allowing Jalen Hurts to be very efficient.
Just overall thoughts on his performance just in this game against Washington. I thought it was one of his better games in the second half of this year.
So did I. I thought he made some really good throws within structure, with precise ball placement. He continued to make critical second reaction plays, both throwing and running. He was very good on 3rd down. So I actually thought this was one of his better games without question. And again, I forget what his total numbers were. Maybe something like 17 for 26. Does that sound right?
It does. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. 17 for 20. So again, he had a few scrambles, but he didn't have to drop back more than 30 times. And by the way, in a game that was close. So this is the way the Eagles want to play. They don't want to ask him to drop back 35 times.
Right. And I think that's the big thing. And then people have talked about, the quality of the opponents and things of that nature. To me, I think when you look at the way that the Eagles have been able to win these games in decisive fashion for the most part, and Dick Sirianni actually said it in his post-game speech to the team that's up now on all Eagles digital channels. He said, look, this wasn't like a game that we've had in the past. We're used to winning by 2-3 scores. Well, this game was not that, right? They win by 1 score. You need that turnover at the end of the game, within under a minute to seal it in the end zone, right? So a different kind of game, but just going back to our original point that you have to find those different ways to come away with a W down the stretch. And this is a team that has found ways to do it. We'll see if they can keep that rolling going into the playoffs. Just kind of looking at the rest of this performance, Greg, we talked about some of the issues the offensive line had in the run game. I didn't think it was certainly one of their better games, especially in the second half of the year. There were definitely some plays they would like to have back. I do think Boston Scott ran really hard, though, and he did some good things in the pass game as well.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, the numbers don't reflect Boston Scott and how hard he ran, but we both agree. And the film tells you, and that's what I do. I tell you what the film says. This was not the best game for their O-line. It was they struggled a bit in the run game, but again, we're not going to look at this game and against Washington and say they have a weakness running the ball. What I love about the Eagles at this point, and you can debate what they are and whether they're going to have to do other things to win in the playoffs, but what we know right now, and it's always good to know, particularly when you're going to the playoffs, is this team has a clear identity on the offensive side of the ball. They know what they are. They know who they are. They know how they have to play. It's not a week-to-week deal.
And I think that too, when you look at like identities of teams that have that ability to make noise in the playoff and challenge the ability to go deep into the tournament, is number one, being strong on both sides of the line of scrimmage, which the Eagles clearly, that's the strength of their team on both sides in both units. And then also defensively to be opportunistic. And I think we have seen that over the course of these last few weeks, whether it's Rodney McLeod making that interception. We saw, we've seen Alex Singleton make plays. We've seen TJ Edwards make plays. The defensive line consistently getting pressure. I think when you look at this defense over the second half of the season, and that showed up in this game against Washington, that ability to be opportunistic, make plays when they come your way.
Yeah. And I think that we've seen, I think we've seen from Jonathan Gannon is now he plays more to the specific opponent. Early in the season, he played pretty much zone every week, and then he started to play more man. Now I think he feels comfortable with the players he's putting out there. I feel like in his mind, given this roster, he knows who he wants to play and how he wants to play. And my sense just watching the tape is it's become a little more opponent specific. So, you might say, well, gee, they started playing a lot more man. Well, this week they didn't play as much man. They played significantly less cover one than they have since week 8 when they began to turn around their season. They played far more split safety this particular week, split safety zone against Washington. So I think he's now more comfortable with his personnel and what they can do, and it's allowed him to be more opponent specific in how he chooses to match up.
Yeah, when you talk about just the different wrinkles, the different evolutions, the different layers that we've seen from that unit, from that side of the football, we saw one really creative one this week with some of the packages they ran with both Jannard Avery and Patrick Johnson on the field together.
I really like that. I really like that.
Creative looks.
Yeah, no, I really like that. They lined up in essentially what we call diamond front, meaning 5 across, because that initial look says to the offensive line that they have one-on-one pass protection because you're covering each offensive lineman essentially, and you can do many things from that. And I think they lined up in that, 3 or 4 times in the game, but Avery got a sack from that look. Actually, Patrick Johnson dropped out, but again, the protection is already set. So you can't change your protection in the middle of the play. And it was what essentially became a TT stunt because Avery was lined up as a stand-up 3 technique, which is a D tackle position. So it was really a TT stunt. Avery was the penetrator. Hargrave was the looper, but Avery did such a good job of just blowing up the center Ishmael and then just pushing him aside and had a straight shot to Heineke and sacked him. That was it was really well done. And that's something I don't recall. I'm not going to sit here and say they never did that this season. I don't recall seeing it, Fran. Maybe you do, but I don't recall seeing that particular look with those particular players.
No, definitely not with those players in that package, right? And look, a big part of that, I would imagine, is that, because we didn't see Derek Barnett in those packages, and Derek Barnett was on the COVID-19 list for the majority of last week. He was activated late Saturday. So my guess is they weren't sure if number 96 was going to be able to play in the game. So, hey, we got to put some of these packages in, but now you've got that in your back pocket. Number one, if you do want to use it moving forward. And number two, it's something that opposing offenses have to prepare for, right? Is having that kind of pressure look. Those looks are now on tape for opposing offenses rather, to get ready for. To me, the other bit, we saw it again on the Josh Sweat sack, the second of Josh Sweat sacks in this game, Greg. And Josh, I mean, he's been outstanding, Greg. I know he's a guy that has really stood out to you on tape as well.
Josh Sweat, to me, we know how they play, and you know me, I never say anything negative about coaches because, hey, I know how hard I work, so I know how hard they work. And we know that very often this year when they line up in those 5-man fronts, he's inside. But I think as a wide 9 pass rusher, particularly over the last month or so, I think he's been as good as anybody in the league. He is really, really good. He's long, he's athletic, he can bend. He's got that length, quickness, flexibility, closing speed profile that you want all edge pass rushers to have. And I made this note after one of the sacks this week, or one of the pass, because not only did he have sacks, he had some great rushes as well that were not sacks. I said if he played predominantly a wide 9, he would be among the league leaders in quarterback sacks. And I believe that.
It's interesting watching him. He's had, if you go back to like last year, a lot of his rushes all started with that long arm, and everything kind of started around that. And you have complementary moves off that long arm. And while that's still a part of his package this year, you're seeing a lot more of like some of those ghost moves and some of those other moves where he's able to win high side, clear the hands of the offensive tackle and get the edge and turn. And you would think for a guy who's 6'5" with his wingspan, those guys typically don't have that flexibility to be able to turn the corner.
He can bend.
Man, he had some great plays turning the corner in this game.
That's what stood out to me this week. I mean, other weeks as well, but it really stood out to me this week in his ability to bend and then close with speed. We see guys try to bend, over the years, even when we watch, college pass rushers, which, you and I'll start getting into in greater detail once the season ends. But a lot of times you see guys who can bend, but then they don't really have the balance to close. And he does. I think he's a really, really good edge pass rusher.
Yeah, and it wasn't just on the sacks. I mean, he had a couple of pressures, and also including one on the fourth down play, that incompletion that Avonte Maddox was on late in the game. You could watch Josh Sweat, his ability to disrupt on that play and pressure the quarterback. Taylor Heineke could not step into that throw, and I think that was a big reason why it was incomplete. He was definitely the defensive lineman that stood out most to me in this game. I thought both safeties really stood out as well, Greg. I would say, Rodney McLeod had the interception at the end, but I thought Anthony Harris really showed up downhill, made some really nice one-on-one tackles as well in this game. Yeah,
no, he showed up as well. I would agree with that for sure.
And then going just to the linebacker level, continuing to see those guys flow to the football. I thought Alex Singleton was all over the place in this game. I think, again, just watching this group continue to feel more comfortable, continuing to understand their roles in the scheme, and it's been a big part of their success.
Yeah, Singleton to me is a fascinating guy because, there's always been this thought and that, hey, he's okay and we need to get better. And, I think you and I have probably even said those things as well. But, he's going to be among the league leaders in tackles. And, he makes a ton of tackles. And to me, he shows up on film. And I keep trying to figure out what is he? In other words, is he a guy as you go forward that you can say, hey, he's one of my linebackers? Because that's a decision they'll have to make because, earlier in the year, I think a lot of people believed, and I probably fell into that camp that, hey, they have to get significantly better at the linebacker position. Well, they signed TJ Edwards, so they clearly see him as a starter, both in base and nickel. You don't sign him, and I don't know what the number is, but it wasn't a small number. You don't sign him with the idea that he's not going to play.
Right.
So they see him as a guy who's going to play in base and in nickel. So the question becomes, what is Alex Singleton? Is he going to be there, or do they look to draft high a linebacker? That's going to be one of the fascinating offseason questions.
Sure. It's something we'll continue to talk about both on the show and on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Greg, let's kind of spin this forward here to Sunday's matchup Saturday night's matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. And look, the Eagles put I think a dozen players on the COVID-19 list. That does not mean that those guys will or won't play. Obviously, with the changes to the protocols, that's just kind of a TBD kind of situation, right? But just kind of looking at the Dallas Cowboys and the team that we will see here at Lincoln Financial Field on Saturday night, Mike McCarthy, the head coach of the Cowboys, came out and said that those guys are going full bore. They're going for the win here at Lincoln Financial Field on Saturday. So with that said, let's talk about this team a little bit and some of the matchups that could be on the table in this game. And we'll start with the Cowboys offense, a group that obviously came into the season with a lot of fanfare. Dak Prescott making his return off the injury from 2020. You get some young pieces, a really exciting group overall. And while they've had flashes this year, they've kind of teetered off over the last month and a half. I'm interested to see what you've seen on tape from this group.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised McCarthy said that because this offense, with very few exceptions over the last month or so, even though they've won games, has not been very good. They cannot run the football. They had a dominant run game through the first 6 weeks of the season. Right now, it's erratic and inconsistent. You can tell they no longer feel comfortable with the run game as a foundation of their offense. Their O-line has not been very good in the run game. I don't think that Zeke Elliott quite has that second level burst that he had when he was great. And Pollard obviously does have that burst, but he's not the feature back. So he's kind of the change-up. So the run game is really a problem. I would say that Dak Prescott has been inconsistent. I would say he at times is not seeing things as clearly as he needs to right now. That results in throws left on the field. He's getting stuck in the pocket too often. too many snaps in which he's not playing with a column helmet. And what I mean by that is where his head's moving around too much. I learned this from Ron Jaworski very early on when Jaws and I started working together back in 1990. And one of the first things he said to me when we started really talking about quarterbacks was, if you see a quarterback when he drops back, if his head is moving too much, that means he's not seeing anything. And Prescott has a few too many snaps where the helmet's not calm. And that means he's not quite getting a clear picture. And you know how fast that goes, Fran, when you're dropping back. If you're not seeing it clearly, it's happening really fast. And another issue he's been having lately is lack of precise ball placement. He's shown some scattershot tendencies. So, he's not played well. The run game has not been very good. To me, it's an offense trying to find its way right now. And that's why I'm not surprised for a second that Mike McCarthy says, we got to put people out there. We don't know what the Eagles are going to do. Maybe they're going to put out, the JV team from across the street, but it doesn't matter to the Cowboys. They need their offense. They need to find their offense.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that, and really in all phases, run game, pass game, just not operating at the level that they would want going into the postseason. This is a team that is still mathematically has the number 2 seed at their disposal. They would need some other things to be able to break their way, things that we would say to be unlikely, but they still have stuff to play for. And so it looks like they're going to go out and try and win this game. The big thing, too, in the offensive line, they've had pieces in and out. I mean,
I know.
La'el Collins at right tackle started the season. He suspended. He didn't play. Zach Martin has been in and out. Tyler Biadasz has been in and out. Tyron Smith has been in and out, right? So they've just had to kind of mix and match.
I mean, I'll give you 2 thoughts here. And again, there are a lot smarter offensive line guys out there, guys like Duke Manyweather and Brandon Thornton. We know both those guys. They're a lot smarter than I am when it comes to offensive line play. But I think Biadasz has not played overly well in the run game. I don't know your thoughts. Maybe I've seen a little more than you have. And I thought the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, they were playing Terrence Steele at right tackle.
Yep.
And he was there when the Eagles and Cowboys first hooked up. What was that, week 3, I believe?
So, yep.
I thought Steele was dominant early in the season. Now, I'm not there every day, so I'm not going to say anything about their coaches, because obviously they replaced Steele with La'el Collins. So in their mind, Collins is their right tackle. But I thought Steele was a major reason why their run game was so good the first 5-6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and he's had to play some left tackle when Smith has been out.
Right. And Smith is not the same guy, by the way. And again, he's had so many back injuries. Again, I don't fancy myself as the guru here, but it seems like when he has to protect, and really kick slide and move laterally to his left, obviously that's what he has to do as the left tackle. I just don't feel like you see the same kind of fluidity, because there was a stretch there where Smith was just about as fluid and athletic as you could possibly be as a left tackle.
Oh, no question. Let's go over to the Dallas defense. This is a group, obviously, I remember when we got together talking about this group before the Eagles played them if that was week 3 on Monday Night Football. That was before they had kind of arrived, right? Micah Parsons was not Micah Parsons. Trayvon Diggs, it was like, he's had some nice plays here and there. He had a couple picks. It was really nice against the Chargers, but we're not sure yet. Well, this is a group that has played at a really high level for the majority of this season. I would argue is playing as one of the best defenses in the league right now. Parsons, a true blue chip talent. Trayvon Diggs, blue chip talent. They get DeMarcus Lawrence back a few weeks ago. He looks like his normal self. So this is a group with players at all 3 levels.
Yeah, they've got playmakers at all 3 levels for sure. Although I will say this, I think Trayvon Diggs, and again, I've probably seen almost every Cowboy defensive game on tape this year. I think Diggs has been really erratic. I think his interception total, and hey, interceptions count. It's like long runs or long passes. They count. But I don't think he's been consistent as a man-to-man defender. And they play a ton of man coverage. I think he's a beatable player. But again, he makes picks. I would say Micah Parsons, and I was on record because I did a piece for the NFL Matchup Show probably 5 or 6 weeks ago, where I said I thought that through that point of the season, he was the best edge rusher in the NFL. And obviously people have come back. Gregory, DeMarcus Lawrence, those guys are pretty good too. So Micah Parsons is now back playing more snaps at stackbacker than he is as an edge player, but they still line him up as an edge player at times. And that guy, I mean, the guy's a freak show. But they are really good up front because Lawrence is really good. You know, I remember you and I talking about Randy Gregory when he came in Nebraska. Yep. I mean, Gregory
match up against Eric Flowers when Flowers was in Miami.
Yeah, and Gregory obviously had all kinds of off the field issues, and hopefully he's okay now. But I thought Gregory coming out of Nebraska, if he was a clean player, was a top 5-6 kind of pick in a draft.
He damn near killed Kyler Murray on Sunday, Greg.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's that guy. And talk about fluidity and bend. I mean, that guy. He's So they have playmakers at all three levels, and now they also have some guys who are beatable. So we know that Brown, the other corner, can be beat.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities here for the Eagles, and we'll see how it goes.
I would think, and again, we don't know what the roster is going to look like, depth chart is going to look like with COVID-19, with who's going to be active, who's not. But trying to run the football against this group, I think might be a good tool to be able to use and try and negate some of the strengths that we're talking about. Try and stay away from Parsons as a pass rusher and what DeMarcus Lawrence brings and Trayvon Diggs. Obviously, you're going to have to throw the football, but trying to make sure that you establish yourself on the ground against this group, I think would provide that would be more fruitful.
And all we can do is talk about it as if players are going to play. But I think one player on their defense, to me, who has stood out all year long is Jaron Kearse. I think Jaron Kearse, he found a place. They don't play base defense. Their base is big nickel. I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would bet they've played 20 snaps of what would be considered base defense all year long. And actually, I'm going to look that up right now because I'm capable of doing that. But I don't think they played much, what we would normally consider base defense. They played 11 snaps of what we would consider base defense with 4 D linemen and 3 true linebackers all year long. So they are a big nickel as their base defense because Jaron Kearse is essentially, he's 6'4", 220 pounds. And assuming everybody plays, and since they do play the highest percentage of cover one in the NFL, he's the tight end matchup.
No, that is a matchup against Dallas Goedert. If Goddard is active for this game, Jordan Lewis, the regular nickel. So when they go just regular nickel, Jordan Lewis steps in the slot. Kearse drops back to strong safety, and away they go. It's a really interesting group, and just they do a lot of different things up front. You talk about the amount of man coverage that they play. They're really aggressive. It's I would say, if you want to talk about like philosophically, it's very similar to the Saints, right? And
somewhat. And I think what Dan Quinn did, again, just shows you how smart guys. He's been coaching a long time. He was the original Legion of Boom with Seattle, where they played literally cover 3 every snap. So what happens now? He comes to Dallas after getting fired in Atlanta as a head coach. And what does he do? They play more cover 1 man coverage than any team in the league. They play a lot of cover 2. They play some cover 3, but not a ton of cover 3. So, it's interesting how he's evolved himself as a coach. And as you said, this year, it's been very successful.
Yeah. And like I said, when you look at just from a profile standpoint, very similar to Dennis Allen and the Saints. Hey, we're going to play a lot of man, especially on third down. We're going to bring our linebackers in as part of the pressure package. We're going to come after you in a lot of different looks, a lot of different ways, a lot of like-bodied guys up front. And, the Eagles have had success against that defense, being able to run the football. And we'll see if that's something they decide to do. But some great talents on that side, Greg. We'll be back breaking it all down next week right here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.
And then I'm getting ready to look toward the playoffs, Fran. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, we got obviously some different possibilities that the Eagles have at their disposal here. It looks like Tampa Bay, the most likely of those scenarios, but it could be the Rams, it could be the Bucs, as we mentioned, it could be the Dallas Cowboys. Even there's lots of different options there. Make sure you go follow Dennis Selman, DENIZ SELMAN. He does a great job breaking all of that down. Dennis Selman 33 on Twitter does a great job of laying it all out, all the different possibilities for the Eagles coming out of this weekend.
Hey, Eagles fans, get ready for the game each Sunday with an exclusive look at Eagles pregame warm-ups brought to you live each week when you join myself, Amy Campbell, and Eagles insider Dave Spadaro on the Kickoff Show presented by Exalta. We provide Eagles-focused analysis, late-breaking news, and the team perspective that you cannot get anywhere else. The Kickoff Show presented by Exalta can be seen live 50 minutes before kickoff on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and the team's social media channels.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
Great stuff there from Greg, who you can follow on Twitter, just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at Eagles XOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce here with Eagles Entertainment. You know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show, but the best way is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and leave us a rating or even leave us a comment. And I wanted to shout out today someone who did exactly that. Achy Pete left a 5-star review saying, I would love to hear an evaluation of where Jalen Hurts stands in his development compared with where Dak Prescott was after he had played the same number of games. Also, compare your pre-draft evaluation of Jalen coming out of college versus Dak Prescott's pre-draft evaluation. Well, Pete, that's a good question, and it's something we have talked about a lot, honestly, on this show, on the Journey to the Draft podcast as well. I think there are a lot of comparisons that you can make between Jalen and Dak when they both came out. Obviously, very similar physical skill sets. I think when you looked at their strengths and weaknesses, both on and off the field, to be honest, coming out of college, I think you could have made that comparison, and I don't think anybody would have told you were nuts. I think that both guys had some issues with some ball placement and accuracy. Both have improved in that area. Both guys had the athleticism. The arm talent was more than good enough with both players. And obviously, both guys had all kinds of intangibles and had a level of success in the SEC for 3-4 years, right? So I think there was plenty that you can compare both of these players on. And then when I think you take it to what they've done so far in the NFL, look, with Dak Prescott, when he first got into the league, that was an offense that didn't funnel through him. It funneled through the run game. And Dallas gave him the opportunity, the ability to learn and develop. And now you see Dak Prescott, who's got that ability to manage the entire offense, and everything can funnel through him on occasion, right? Whenever he's healthy, Dak Prescott's got the ability to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. We talked about it earlier with Greg. I think when you talk about this offense, what they can be, their strength right now is going to be when they have a fully healthy Dak Prescott and they can funnel it through him. And so, look, I think when you look at the comparison, it's tough because they're at very different stages of their career. But I think you can certainly make that comparison with where Jalen Hurts is now to where Dak Prescott was. Now, does that mean that Jalen Hurts is definitely going to be Dak Prescott? No, they're different players. They're different situations, different people, right? So you can't say apples to apples. That's exactly where Jalen Hurts is going to end up being 5 years from now. But I do think that there are definitely comparisons you can make. And Jalen has really come a long way. He's improved in a lot of ways. Even if you look from his rookie year in 2020 to this season, he's taken care of the football at a higher rate. He's been more accurate. He's done a nice job overall this year at being a very efficient passer, taking what the defense has given him. Obviously, he's still going to make plays with his legs, and it hasn't always been perfect. There have been plays that he would like to have back that, look, he runs away from a pocket, and maybe he leaves a receiver open downfield. Maybe he puts a ball on the ground when he's leaving the pocket as well. There are plays that he would like to have back, but it's very rare that you see him make a lot of those same mistakes consecutively, time after time after time. He's continuing to learn, continuing to improve, and so that's been the big thing that has stuck with me this season, watching Jalen Hurts, and obviously the story not done being written yet here for him in the 2021 season. Excited to watch Jalen continuing to prove himself in some of these high leverage situations here down the stretch. So great stuff there from Pete. Great question. Thank you, and thank you as well to everybody out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcasts here with Eagles Entertainment. That being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We will talk to you later this week. When the clock hits all zeros, the game might be over, but the action is not. Join us for the post-game show presented by Rico for instant reaction. Watch live as Coach Nick Sirianni and Eagles players come to the podium and meet with the media. We will make sure you do not miss a word. Myself, Ike Reese, and Gabriella DiGiovanni will also break down the game live at the desk and hear from Eagles insider Dave Spadaro to get his thoughts. The post-game show presented by Rico can be seen on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and the team's social media channels.